All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to Dan's Astrology. Today is Friday, October the 10th, and the video that I'm recording today is on the topic of Venus in Virgo in an opposition to a retrograde Saturn in Pisces. At the time of recording this, Venus is at 25 degrees, Saturn is at 27 degrees, and they are forming an opposition. And I'd like to introduce this by, if you consider the quality of Venus having to do with beauty and ornamentation, that I happened upon a feather that is fairly striking in that it's bright orange. Now this feather belongs to a certain kind of a woodpecker. Hopefully I'm not doxing myself too much. I am on the Pacific Flyway. This is a flicker, which are called flickers because when they look basically like brown birds, so kind of a woodpecker, and when they flap their wings, it exposes the underside of their feathers here at a certain part of their wings, which are orange, and so there are these orange flashes or flickers. And I thought it was kind of interesting to consider this because when we think about colors, I guess there are, things like oranges and marigolds, and the color oranges, it's interesting if you think about if you apply this to archetypal psychology, that reading James Hillman reminded me that there's a certain kind of inherent, people talk about all kinds of things like color psychology. I often think, I don't know if necessarily the orangeness of this is fairly yang-y, right? And the woodpecker, the way that they'll fly onto people's chimneys and pound on their chimney to make all this noise or whatever, right? It's a very yang-y bird, but there's something about the color though is interesting because the idea of the color, there's a certain subjectivity where some people are colorblind. Not all animals may register or process color the same way, and yet this feather, which is orange like this, has to be objectively orange. Like the animal has to have actually evolved materially the ability to produce this orange color in its wing, and that the materiality of this orange feather is objectively real, to the sense that it's real for the animal, it's real for the human. But anyways, I don't know. This is just a certain the other thing, of course, about this is that the fallen feather. There's this kind of idea of like, it's almost like finding things which are cast aside, like yesterday's fashions, the old things which have gone out of style, right? Or there's some kind of like, it's a very striking feather though. It's a nice find, and it's like but it's something which has been cast away, which has it used to adorn this woodpecker, and now it has fallen off, and it's cast aside, And it's like they're also seasonal birds that show up certain times more than others, and it could be that this kind of thing of like the idea of to me, there's something about the feather is very beautiful, but it's a fallen feather that's no longer on the bird. It's perhaps of a bird that's migrated away to another place. It's a kind of an artifact, a found artifact, right? And on this theme of finding the artifacts which may have a certain kind of striking aesthetic quality, perhaps, I have also unearthed certain artifacts, such as the old school iPod mini and the 160 gig iPod, and there's something about this sort of thing about different trends, different phases, different fads, and what's popular and what's in fashion. And there's a sense of course of when you're the Saturn stands for this thing of aging and being kind of aware of being that I'm a millennial and feeling that I'm very approaching middle age and that I'm not, maybe up with all. There's something about like there's something about, for multiple reasons, contributing to this. Um, Not least of which may be certain political ramifications. I've decided, this is being coming of age and getting older, and trying to put limits on things and put childish things behind you. I have decided, I basically, perhaps impulsively, decided to cancel my YouTube music subscription, in which I'm paying $15 a month for, because there's something about the regardless of all this tech bro political stuff, there's this. I'm starting to question why I'm paying $15 a month to just get ads off of music, and then having sometimes the what the algorithm recommends me it starts to feel like you're basically paying an algorithm to mentally abuse you for, or not, or misunderstand, or try to like coax you into some other direction of like, why do you listen to this, why don't you listen to that, or why, like this whole kind of thing about like, one of the things that's interesting about this iPod too is that, I don't know, part of my psychology is that in the year 2011 I had a psychotic break, and then it also just happened to coincide with the time that I decided to stop managing an iTunes library, because I was, for a long time I was very like invested lots of time and energy into managing an MP3 collection, and then it was like this sort of like shift into like streaming and shift into this new era of the way people do things, and I just did not really want to adapt. And there's something about the well, actually, I guess I did. I kind of just, and there's some underlying issue around this that I I had. I remember I was in a band. I have to admit, though, this is what's kind of funny, that like I'm trying to give you an example of like why I'm motivated to. It almost feels like a taboo the way the algorithms work, because the algorithms work in such a way that it seems like there's something about it where it's like, if you actually explicitly talk about how the algorithms work, it's like um you're almost like breaking the fourth wall or breaking some kind of taboo. And that, like, for one thing, I like making electronic music, and I've collected synthesizers ever since high school, basically, drum machines and synthesizers, going back to the Y2K era. And I have actually played in bands, although I have to admit none of my bands are very successful, and I'm maybe not. I feel like I'm kind of disorganized as a musician. I'm not very good at like learning songs, and having I just like jamming out and having these free form jam sessions. And this has kind of led me to just monkeying around with electronic music. But there's something about, like, it just reminded me that like it's almost like getting targeted. I mean, some of the schizophrenic people use ideas like gang stalking, and I don't personally go for that idea. But there is kind of funny, like, I remember I was getting these AI slop videos of like like a picture of a person who is like at home alone, laying in their bed, listening on headphones to music, and they're like they're too scared to go out, and they're hiding. And the name of the channel is called No Band Experience, and it's just like a socially withdrawn person who has no experience with real music, who is just listening to it on their headphones, withdrawn from. And so the thing is, it's like, why am I paying $15 a month to listen to music on a platform which then like is like, okay, we're gonna have an AI slop bot try to like create YouTube channels just to sort of like try to piss you off, or like like, oh, you're probably frustrated that you're like, you have some sort of attachment to the sentimentality of the past, and you're lonely at home listening on your headphones, why don't we just like fuck with you and make you pissed off about this, and then you're gonna pay $15 a month of the company that basically, you know, congratulations, you give us your data, and this is what you do with your free time, your hobbies, your music, and we'll find ways to make you feel bad about it, and then we'll charge you, you know, pay money for it. Great. That's part of the reason why I decided not to do this, or decided to stop paying for YouTube Music. But then I have to admit, I have a certain kind of like, is making videos for YouTube like this a kind of an addiction? And I have to admit, it's reminding me of things in the past that's coming up to mind, like a friend who I used to play music with was or certain musicians that I would meet, like not just one friend, but I'd meet other people, and a lot of people have a very anti-YouTube, anti-internet mentality, or at least to like, I don't know, back, like, I mean, I know some people might choose like SoundCloud, but then Bandcamp, they all get bought out by the big conglomerates, right? There's basically, I've met people who had a very strong stance to be like, I'm not gonna just like make all my stuff and then put it on YouTube as a platform, or like have our whole, like, we're even back to the MySpace days. Like, we're not gonna be like some band that's like a MySpace band that we're gonna try to get all our followers. We're gonna be like, you know, or like there's some kind of like a different mentality for doing things. But there's kind of like the idea of, also when it comes to making electronic music, is that I have it set up so that I've got a webcam, and it's just really, I could be recording into my DAW, and it could be really easy if I'm doing something that I'm having fun with, just to hit record on the camera and then stick a camera on what I'm doing. And then, but there's this kind of question about like, is it better to be like recording everything I'm doing in my process and just like making it all visible, making it all transparent? Or is it better to be able to do things sort of behind closed doors, if you will, or to do things with a certain degree of privacy or within a certain kind of container, rather than making your whole creative process visible and then it's like making it food for some algorithm to comment on or something like that. What I'm trying to say here is that finding this feather reminded me of the color orange. Obviously, I don't know if you guys can tell because I have some posters up, but the background of this room, well, especially if I do this, is orange. I'm in an orange room. And there's some sort of thing about the color orange, which also, I have to admit that this room has not always been orange, but it's been orange for a long time. And sometimes when I watch other videos on YouTube, or there's a part of the way the YouTube algorithm works, is that there's some sort of like, it visually compares it to other videos, and there might be even just be this like, if I were to just record this with a white wall in the background, or put up a screen in the background or something like that, then I would like immediately jump up the algorithm, just because people who paint their wall beige do better in the algorithm. And if you look like somebody with a beige background rather than an orange background in a bookshelf, you're going to be categorized different or something. You know, like there's all these like tricks with the algorithm. But there's something about this. This is the room that I have right now, which is my bedroom, which is the one room that is truly my room, that I can close the door and just have this as my space. And that the other rooms in my house, that I record in, are more of an open concept area that is less private. And so there's this kind of like idea of like, to me, there's something about the orange feather, which is like, could stand for some sort of thing which is an adornment which has fallen and been cast aside, or could also be the resonance of this orange thing, and a kind of a signal of the creative process within the orange container here, right? Also, of course, there's also this thing, interestingly enough, did you know that England was actually once ruled by the Dutch, the House of Orange? And there's also kind of thing about this whole, like, Oh, political stuff. I don't know when we get. There's relevant because there's a whole lot of politics going around these days about border control, border security, um, and it's interesting to look at history because if even stuff like England, there was a time when the throne was held by the French or the Dutch or whatever, and there's the I don't know. I'm not sure where I'm going with that, but there's something is interesting also with this basic idea of like l- limits and boundaries and being able to work within a kind of contained space, or being able to like if like this little thing is that, like, so if maybe if I am just going to be lonely and listening to music on headphones, then maybe I'll do it on my old iPods and then not have to worry about an algorithm trying to psychologically abuse me and then create doubt and uncertainty of why I'm paying money for this service in the first place. You know what I'm trying to say? Let me, if somebody want, or there's also this whole I don't know. The one thing that's interesting about this is that I've decided like to just keep this iPod as a kind of like a time capsule of like 2011, where it's like even if you go and, because this thing hasn't been synced since 2011 and it often just is left in a drawer and the battery dies, it's like if you just charge it up and you go to the clock in the date and time on this thinks it's still in 2011. And so it's like this is really, it's like if you think to create this sense of limits and boundaries and stuff like that, it's like I could reset this thing, wipe it clean, and then just try to build up. But this thing is basically almost full, right? This has got a whole like 150 gigabytes worth of music, and instead of putting all this time and energy into managing a library, I can just have this as a time capsule. This thing is preserved from all the stuff that has happened since 2011, 2012. It is a link back to the past, basically, right? And um, and then I can basically live in a safe container where I don't have to deal with the reality of the present moment, and I can be safely contained within this nostalgia trip of, or like it's a journey back to be like who I was before I had a psychotic break, before I had to deal with all that kind of stuff, and it's just perfectly contained like this for and it also reminds me that there was that this whole theme of having, I mean, the theme of this was played out also in this show that I liked called Murder at the End of the World by Brett Marling and Zal Batmanjali or whatever, the guys that did the OA. And there's part of the plot lines of that show is that there's a Gen Z protagonist who, like, the thing is, I don't know, my dad left behind a lot of, like, maybe CDs and music and stuff like that, but he wasn't really much of an MP3 player guy. But I guess the idea is that there's in Murder at the End of the World, there's the Gen Z protagonist whose mother passed away, and she has inherited she has her old iPad, which she'll just charge up but not change, and it's just like a time capsule of like the music her mom would listen to. But then in that there's all these sort of like cheesy song picks or whatever that are kind of like things that would be these eccentric choices that you wouldn't find that an algorithm would recommend you. And that there's this kind of, the funny thing too about this is that if you see when this one even has like a Game Boy screen kind of display. It's there's something about this which is kind of charming, right? It's almost like the new retro. And I have just been, there's something about this which I have been kind of on recently. I've been going through a phase of a retro computing kind of kick, but it's interesting because as a millennial, you grow up with other people's nostalgia, like other people being nostalgic for things like Atari or whatever, or these old like Pong games, or like these stuff that like people are nostalgic for stuff that you weren't even around for. But then now it's like you get to be in nostalgia for your own nostalgia. Like this times were simpler when we just had like there's also this whole Clippy movement that's about this, trying to avoid the invasive AI. And like we have these phones that advertise to you that your Google phone, when you're trying to shop for parsley or cilantro, your phone is going to be going on lecture. Like this is like the whole point is like, you know, I don't like it when human beings are like this when I'm trying to go grocery shopping. I don't want my fucking phone to be like it either, right? It's like you're precisely like there's also this sense of like alien consumer alienation where it's like the tech industry seems to be like trying to be like, oh, like this thing, we're going to specifically design something which is like either scary or something you don't want or that you're going to want to actively avoid, and then we're going to make it seem like it's a hot new thing that you're going to want to do to people. I've always been like there's this whole, I think the problem is that I kind of some people will tell you that if you work in the tech industry, like the more closer you are to the tech industry, there's this kind of like Jungian enantiodromia, where the more you know about how technology works, the less you want to use it, and the more you just want to go like off grid in the middle of the forest somewhere and never touch any computers at all. And I can't say that I never got that deep into but it was like if that's if you're at all technically literate and if you're working in that industry and you've had exposure to people who know more about things than you do, then you're gonna like I've always had this sort of like aversion to the invasiveness of like surveillance and being spied on and all this kind of stuff. And it's like I'm also kind of I don't know, maybe there's also this sort of like this accelerationist nihilist streak. Like, why do I use YouTube so much? Or is this a bad habit, making YouTube videos? Like, or am I just feeding the beast or something? Right? Like, there's something about this where setting there's some issue. It's still, I think the point is that if we live in a media saturated environment, you might as well make the most of it, I guess. But I don't know, I'm kind of like trying to balance this thing of like techno-Ludditism or whatever, right? Of like trying to, this fear of technology, wanting to kind of go back, be a bit more old fashioned. Or I'm basically also questioning this kind of thing. There's like, I find it very strange, anyways. I'll give you another example. Is that I also have these. It's like this kind of. I have this poster in the background, this yellow one, and it's kind of funny because it's like I like, which is for this Stereo Lab record, and then I was like, I don't know why, I was just like in a record store and I found this. I'm like, oh, is this one? I'll buy this one, right? And then I realized that because I had this record I've had it pirated sitting on this iPod. And there's like, you think about how much money it costs to buy the fancy deluxe vinyl version of this versus like all the free music that it's like kind of like the vinyl shopping has become this thing. It's kind of like a market of guilt, I find, right? Because we have so many people that it's like there's so much music that's available for free or that's for streaming, and you feel, you feel guilty, so that you're like, you know what, I'll go and I'll buy. This is the one that I'm familiar with because this is the one that I had on my iPod, and then but I've kind of forgotten about it, right? And so it's like I can do right by the artist by buying their fancy vinyl record for this thing I pirated, and that's it. But there's if the value of it's amazing to me though that like this kind of like each of these things are like records have jumped up in price to be really really expensive and they're very impractical, and then people will just sell off their whole record collection, sell off their whole. There's something about this too where it's like it's like with Saturn, right? There's a sense of like the consumer alienation, right? Where it's like you want to have you want your identity. It's like if I just keep buying this stuff, it's like I'm practicing being this person who identifies with this identity because I would like this kind of music or that kind of music, or I'm this kind of person. But more as time goes on with Saturn, more and more these like that buying that record is like a reference to the time capsule that is like back when you'd be putting this stuff on your iPod and listen to it's like this sort of like time cap of some person who's stuck back in time. And then there's kind of interesting, there's this whole problem about like the demand to just like let like all this stuff would just be like attachments to the past, and you have to like Marie Kondo your life to the point where you're just like in it. Well, I guess that's not the point, because you're supposed to, if it gives you joy, you're supposed to keep it, right? But there's still this underlying premise in the culture, I find, around minimizing or trying to be like very very like on the dot or on the nose whatever is fresh and current, and like that if you are, like what I'm trying to say is that when I use YouTube music, and let's say I'm listening to one of the things that I like YouTube is because I don't know, it's kind of like the wild wild west still a little bit on YouTube, because anybody can just like upload their friend's band, and there's not really like as strict of a process for getting music on YouTube as there would be on maybe like Spotify or Apple Music. That's kind of what I liked about it. And there's something about this where it's like, that's why I thought, okay, I'll pay for YouTube Music because they have a good extensive. But if you're listening to music from like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, the way the algorithm works is like, do you realize you're going to be 40 years old soon, and you are stuck listening to the same music when you were when you were a teenager, and that you don't go out to shows anymore, and that if you went out to shows, you'd probably feel like some weird old dude, and everybody would look, like the YouTube algorithm is not trying to like encourage you to go out and have a good time. It's making you like, oh, this is what I like. I don't know. I mean, like, for me, it's like, one of the things that makes life good, I would say, is that you can enjoy music if you want to. I don't know, like there's this new attitude about like I'm remembering being in a relationship with somebody who's a little bit younger than me, who admittedly, well, I don't know, I try not to talk about this relationship too much, but there's like, I was shocked to hear her say like, I don't know, maybe I need to take a break from listening to music. Maybe I listen to music too much. Maybe listening to too much music is driving me crazy or something like this, right? Or like there's this kind of thing that's like there's this kind of thing where it's like, the more I'm using these streaming platforms, and the more I'm like, if you try to listen to just listen to the stuff you like to listen to, it's always like shaming you for being stuck in the past, shaming you for being an old person, or being all like, oh, it's only little teeny boppers that do this. Like the whole thing is set up to be like it's like what you want to use the product for is like bait on a hook, so that then once you do it, who knows what the fucking point is, but there's all these other interests who are like, oh great, now that we've got it, now that the mouse has gone for the cheese, we can inflict pain on him and make him suffer and make him hate himself for what? For why? For what's the point? What are you trying to accomplish? And then this is kind of what I was kind of playing off this with my last video with this Deepak Chopra, that apparently nobody can make you feel anything. It's your choice to, about how you react to any but there's something about this stupid social media or this algorithm brain that starts to feel like, I don't know, it feels more and more like the more give myself over to this machine, I'm just being conditioned. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm giving into it, but there's some, it's at some like it's also odd because like what I'm trying to say is like the part about this where it's like they're creating AI slop videos that seem like they're directly there to frustrate you or to make you feel bad about whatever your your data use habits are. That it's a, and it, like in that to actually speak about that explicitly seems like you're breaking a taboo. It's like there's so many things about that go into the algorithm that pile up that you're supposed to like just sort of pretend that they're not there. It's like they're like there's something, I think, was it Serial Experiments Lain that said something about how the internet and the subconscious are kind of becoming the same thing. Like it's just, what's interesting about it too is that I've listened to some intellectual dudes online suggest that if the way that the algorithm on YouTube works is not that there's some person who explicitly wants to influence you to do something some way, but rather there's a kind of, the AI is just trying to do its best with the limited resources it has to give something that would be relevant to you. But then it's kind of it's just curious to me how there's all this sort of like like if I'm making like electronic music, there will be like some AI thing will be like, oh, humans are obsolete, we can just make electronic music that sounds better than a human. Like it's like the whole like, why are you marketing a product to people that makes them feel bad about themselves, right? Like, or like, why would you expect me to pay for? I mean, I have to admit, I did pay for MidJourney a little bit when it first came out, just to see what it was like and the novelty of to see what you could do with it. But like, why would I pay for a service that seems to be geared against me or that uses whatever my interest as a bait on a hook to like, this is, and then I think maybe this sort of like, you could play that with the Pisces fish image, you know, Saturn setting a limit. This little fish ain't biting that hook anymore, YouTube. And like I'm doing this because I also one of my I'm recording now in my room on this little iPad mini, and the funny thing about this is that this iPad mini has become old enough that I can't actually upload to YouTube anymore directly from the iPad mini. It's basically going to be like, it's approaching obsolescence because if I can watch YouTube but I can't upload to YouTube with it, or maybe I have to use the browser. I don't know. I'm what There's something about the format of the media is that like it's extremely easy just to like have a phone or an iPad and just hit record and talk, and then they give you unlimited. Like, have you ever considered that like, another business model might be that for every hour that you upload, you'd actually have to pay for it, right? This, like, YouTube gives you unlimited uploads that you can just and you don't have to pay up front. There's very little overhead, considering that the technology used to record this is something that everybody is basically made to have by default on mandatory anyways. It's essentially entirely free thing, and so like it seems like, is it like a junk food? Is it an unhealthy habit to be doing this, or is it like, is there some sort of like silver lining to all this that still justifies using YouTube, right? Or I also just kind of feel like what I'm trying the part of this whole retro the ret there's something about this my recent retro tech fetishism is that to have if you consider anyways that each album that you'd buy as a vinyl record nowadays I went to a record store in the mall and they had I was thinking about buying the Downward Spiral and then they like had the Downward Spiral for Nine Inch Nails at the mall and it was like $60 for a deluxe double LP and it's like and then they had like MF Doom or Mad Villain or something, $60 for a deluxe double L. And it's all these like six like I don't know. I've got like I'll give you an example. I mean, I know this isn't like it's kind of funny because it's like we when it comes to like the formats of media, and you are like going to the mall to buy something that's new, I guess they are. I have to admit, they're probably putting things on like super heavyweight vinyl or something like that, and it's like better quality. So that and maybe they have some. Maybe they'll have like an extra record that has some bonus tracks or something on it. But like, I these are some just examples. Like I got this at a cute little secondhand store. We have Madonna. Look at this, $10. Not $9.97. I got this for $10. This is the one that has Holiday, Borderline, Lucky Star. This is Madonna's first record for $10. Now, okay, this is a little bit. This is a little bit more expensive. This is a double LP, 28 from Audiophile on Commercial Drive. I don't go to Commercial Drive anymore. I wonder if I hope. I used to just go to Vancouver to just buy records. You know what I was also thinking? This is Prince's 1999, the original one for $30. There's something about this. Having the hard copy in analog rather than digital, and the sort of like there's something about when you like have this and you put it on an actual turntable, and then is there something that's like you're listening. This is how Prince intended to be listened to, right? There's something about there's something also about like listening to '80s music, the way that it came out seems to like encapsulate something of that era, and it's sort of it could be a hipster thing to just like collect old records and stuff like that. But what am I trying to say is that because it like with this that take there's certain there's something about the act of like wanting to go to a record store and like and dig through the crates that it's like on I think that with YouTube and social media and the algorithm, what are people doing? It's like they're crate digging but online, right? Like the scroll is like what if the whole attitude of YouTube scrolling is or like social media scrolling is actually the same as as record store crate digging, because you're like I'm just going to spend a good hour flipping through all this stuff and seeing if I have anything I like, and then I'll choose the thing that I like to take home and bring home with me. There's this whole like activity around it, right? And so I think that these kinds of environments like libraries or record stores have conditioned us. It's also, I mean, it's kind of sad because it used to be like an event where you go out to the city, you get to hang out and have lunch in the city and like see some sights and go to the record store and dig through record crates and buy some records and stuff. And now it's like, now you just get to sit at home in your room on your phone and it like gives you the same digital experience, but you're like doing it in a way that you don't get to go out and experience the actual outside world. You're just isolated at home in your room. And then it like if that on its own wasn't bad enough, then now you've got an algorithm there to remind you and basically shame you, and to be like, even if were in a band where you played music with your friends, they're going to be like, oh, we're going to make a YouTube channel just for you and call it No Band Experience. Here's a guy who just wants to buy guitar pedals, but he's never played in a band before. He doesn't know anything about playing real music. He's just there's a whole actually a market for people who like just like goofing off with, making, or like people who are, like I don't. There's some sort of like you could be like you could be a painter and have like no art gallery experience, no art, never had a show before, and you have like somebody has like imagine if somebody has like a painting channel where you're like, here guys, I'm just trying to like express myself as an artist, and then you'll have all the YouTube channel algorithms are like no art exhibition experience, no art school experience, no here's a channel for people who's had their portfolio rejected and nobody likes them. It's like they're just gonna. It's like the algorithms there just to like why it's like what I mean what you don't pay for money, you have to pay for in humiliation, degradation, and suffering. And I think there's certain things about like when it comes to boundaries and limits, why not set a limit to that, right? Rather than be like, oh, well, I guess the algorithm just here to remind me that, I'm persisting in some shameful, humiliating activity, and it's like I'm only choosing. There's something. I think there's some honest thing about being an artist or creative type where there's some. Might be easier just to do other things, right? And it's like you might have your own critical voice, your own self internalized critic that it makes it difficult for you to create stuff. That why on earth would you pay for fucking machines to you don't have enough of that already? Let's just give people more of it, right? And then rather than to be like like this kind of attitude of you like there's something about like having if I have to pay so much money for music and I have 150 gigs worth of music just sitting on an iPod that I forget about and leave, and it's like it's totally you can understand the level. There's also what I realized too is that like think about streaming seems ridiculous in this context because streaming is like paying $15 a month to listen to music. So you're basically downloading the same thing to your phone over and over and over again, rather than just saving a copy of it and then listen, so that you could listen to it without internet connection. Like it seems kind of odd. Like we're just gonna be like, so why don't I just like not spend any money on that and have like hours and hours and hours and hours of music that I don't have to pay for that's on an iPod for the rest of my life. That like. And that there's something about when now I have to go to record stores and buy all the records out of a sense of guilt and obligation and shame because it's like, if I pirate all the music, I'm a bad, because my value is I want people who make stuff that I appreciate to be able to continue to do that and to earn, so that it's a viable option to earn a living as an artist or a creative person or something like that. And you don't no people don't have to feel like under the gun to like to give up on all that for the sake of survival, right? Or that we want to have, you want to be a patron of the arts to support things, right? And not just to be like, I feel you don't want to be just like stingy. That's like another thing about Venus and Saturn is it could be just like feeling stingy about things, right? There's like there's also I just there's a certain issue about like how also I seem to be better than other people about like not breaking phones and not breaking iPads and not and of keeping things in working condition. And it's sort of like it seems like there's a certain in like capitalism wants to sell you the same thing over and over and over again, right? And it's like there's something also ridiculous about it where it's like you could have a perfectly. I think like this is the whole subscription model is that they don't want you to just like put the money down on a product and then just have this thing that you continue to use for the rest of your life. It's like there's this weird like life cycle of like capitalism where it's like every 5 or 6 years you just have to start from scratch, and you're just like, it's like when you start to if you're using like what like technology from 20 years ago and it still works, and then it's also got all the stuff on it that you don't have to pay for, like a subscription. You're like, it feels like you're cheating, right? It feels like I should be like I should have to buy my everything that I own. I need to just buy it again every single year, right? Or I have new, because everything's wear out, right? You new car, new it's also odd working as a TV salesman, because it's like with TVs, it's like things go obsolete every 2 years or something like that. And we have this, in order to like keep growth going, we just have to be at where you can't, if you are using stuff that is from a certain period of time in the past, that's shameful, right? You're not supporting our economy by using old stuff from just living in the past, or recycling or reusing. You've got to we're gonna have to completely reinvent. We're gonna have to make it so that DVDs, CDs, Blu-rays, they can't be used. We're gonna have to create some new formats. So we're gonna have to get everybody to buy everything again, and then we're gonna have to we're gonna have to create a new kind of computer that means that nobody can connect to the internet anymore, and so that you're gonna have to pay a subscription, it's just and it's there's kind of what if you were just to instead of being I have to, I don't know. I also had this thing happen recently where my cell phone company was trying to make me upgrade my cell phone and offer me a deal, and I just got mad at them and told them no. And then I'm thinking about to get a dumb phone or something. I'm kind of just on the techno. I'm on the techno Luddite retro tech where it's doesn't it just feel better to you want to just to have one of these screens, and you're yes, I don't know. This is my Venus and Saturn contribution right now. Anyways, this is the best I can do with it. But it's rather than, what I'm trying to say is that why rather than having this it's always now, and you always just have to buy everything over again, and you can't live in the past, and you can't like the same band you used to like, and you can't you just you have to keep renewing your subscription to being a valued human being, right? Sorry, you don't count as a person anymore. Your human life subscription has expired. Goodbye from the human race, you techno Luddite. You have to have the latest iPhone before you count as a citizen of the human race, or you have to have the latest implant chip in your brain. Thank you. Good night. Okay, bye.